Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I don't quite know how to follow the last talk. It was really impressive. Thank you. It's really exciting to see zero knowledge proofs. He's getting a standing ovation. Zero knowledge proofs in the wild, finally, in many forms. I'm here to talk about kind of a bit of philosophy, a bit of motivation, a bit of like asking the question of why do we do what we do here. So please stay. And it's not a talk about NFTs, even though I've got a CryptoPunk on my T-shirt. Happy to talk about NFTs later. But it's really talking about the kind of the reasons behind crypto, at least for myself, and asking some questions about why do we do this thing and what are some guiding principles. We've been through a pretty wild couple of years, and I'm sure we're all shaking off the recent drama in the markets, and suddenly crypto's not cool anymore, which is my favorite place to be. I've been doing crypto. In February next year, it'll be my 10th year in crypto. I guess, why am I still standing here? But I am very passionate about this space. I was a co-founder at Pantera Capital, and then I started this company, Orchid Labs, which is focused on decentralized VPNs. Currently, I'm also a partner at Fabric Ventures, and I do a lot of angel investing and advising companies in space, based in Lisbon, if you're ever in my neighborhood. So this is the word of the day, iconoclasm. So iconoclasm it's really it's the destruction of symbols, the destruction of things that we worship, things that are symbols of power, symbols of, you name it, kind of like the sort of destruction of our idols. Like, so what does it mean to be iconoclastic? Well, iconoclasm was really very much the inspiration for the punk movement in the mid-70s. I grew up in England, and even though I caught the tail end of that, by the time I was a teenager, it was the mid-80s. And I still remember going down to King's Road and seeing the guys in their crazy haircuts and cool outfits and the safety pins. But what were they protesting? What was this movement about, other than like really loud music? And then there's all sorts of different versions of punks nowadays. Well, it was very much an anti-authoritarian, kind of do-it-yourself, rebelling against social norms. And yes, we'd had many of these times before, but if we think through the early internet, the cypherpunk, what was really happening there, and how did we get to this world now where the concept that the internet is some revolutionary thing is like a bit weird, right? So, but the internet, in its journey through the web, through social media, was revolutionary, was incredibly disruptive to many, many industries. It's easy to forget with the current landscape of the internet that industries such as the music industry, journalism, obviously brick and mortar stores were just completely revolutionized and changed in this very kind of disruptive, very rapid movement. But the early internet, very much from the cypherpunk era, message boards, bulletin boards, the groups building, so like I read a list of the kind of common cypherpunks. You've got like Phil Zimmerman, you've got Andreessen, you've got obviously Satoshi. You've got these people who are building cryptographic technology in order to be able to communicate and do this in a way which is outside the purview of normal society. But the internet was also there for if you are from a particular belief or something that really isn't supported, the way you are, your lifestyle or your orientation. This idea that you could communicate instantly with anybody, anywhere in the world, and find a community. I've been reading Balaji's new book on nation states, and the idea is really that we're forming communities, and I think we're all quite familiar with this in crypto. We're forming communities outside of the bounds of a normal physical state. It's not like you move to Paris because you have a certain belief system, or you move to Lisbon or San Francisco, etc. We're now forming these connections and building, and I think crypto is probably one of the largest communities around this, is that these belief systems. So what are our beliefs, and why do we even have this phrase Web3? I prefer to call it crypto, but the idea of Web 2, Web 3, what's wrong? Like, what's going on? Like, how did this happen? Well, we can talk for a long time about the evils of Facebook, Twitter, of like, you know, the social addiction, the kind of the, this idea that you just, you're being owned by these corporations. And we can do that all day, but there's many movies about that. I don't think that it's really that Andrew Zuckerberg or any of these guys were necessarily evil people. I don't think they sat down and said, I'm going to build this system to control the world. There's a book called The Circle and also The Every by Dave Eggers, which talks about this in a very sort of fictional format. And if you really look at the architecture of the systems, these are, in the simplest form, a server with a bunch of clients connected to it, and advertising systems that run in that centralized architecture. Now, if you want to have good advertising, you need to collect more data. So the person who has the most data, who has the best engines for analyzing these things, is going to win. So it's not like we have some evil plan by, maybe they get evil later, but some evil plan by these overlords to build these systems. It's just really a function of the architectures. These centralized architectures are going to lead to these systems that we tend not to like nowadays. And it's not a search for profit. It's really a function of how these systems are designed from the beginning. And then the question comes is, can we do something different? Because, as I'll talk about in a minute, if we keep going down the road that we're on, and if our space gets co-opted by the same kind of ideas, we may end up with something worse than we think we're going to start it from. Right? There's like this crypto decentralized systems may not actually give us this utopia that we hope for. It may be actually worse. I have a CryptoPunk, it's on my t-shirt, but as I said, this is not an NFT talk. The concept of crypto, I first became exposed to distributed decentralized systems in the early 2000s. I was part of a startup that was building on top of Nutella, or like inspired by Nutella, to build decentralized search. I then ended up at Sun. I worked with Bill Joy and worked on a lot of the early peer-to-peer decentralized systems. And at the time, it just made a lot of sense to me. And when I found Bitcoin in 2013, I tried to understand the existing financial system almost in the context of Bitcoin, and it didn't make a lot of sense. I was like, this other system seems much more logical. The decentralized architecture makes a lot of sense. This current system seems really unwieldy, and so on. I'm sure many of you have you all have your own story as to how you found the space and what was interesting about it. The sort of radical decentralized architecture was the thing that got me the most. From a computer science perspective, I was just like, wow, this is fascinating. How would we even architect these systems? How do we build these systems that scale and do interesting things? Because it seemed like the advantages of it were obvious. If you go all the way back to the beginning of the internet and look at the design points, can a system for communication and sharing information withstand a nuclear attack? That's why we had these decentralized architectures rather than just something sitting in a mountain in Denver. So this kind of radical style of thinking really attracted, I believe, many people from many different walks of life, people who wanted to make a difference and do something that was really counter to the existing status quo, hence the idea that we're all punks. And I think that decentralization can really be the basis for a better future. And if I'm not appealing to your hearts and your minds, maybe I can appeal to your wallet. So if we take a look at the last 6 months of carnage, and yes, with one notable exception, which I guess was just a bad algorithm, the decentralized systems have actually won out in comparison to centralized systems. And why is that? Well, if you look back to Satoshi's initial vision, and when he started this, or they started this, the inspiration was very much around looking at what the central banks are doing, looking at the way that the banks were getting bailed out. There's this complete opaque system. We can now look back in hindsight and look at credit derivative swaps and say, well, now that we know the data, we can see how these things failed. But given that we had no data, it was all extremely opaque, as is the case for the lending platforms that have recently fallen over in our space, it becomes obvious. Well, if you take a look now at, I'm going to call one out, but Celsius, with they had to recently pay back all of their DeFi liabilities before they could even enter bankruptcy. And so they did that. The sequence was pay back all the DeFi debt and then file for bankruptcy. that system, if it had been even more opaque, we may never have understood what was happening. But if it had been more transparent, as we'd seen with the DeFi protocols that carried on working, and we see with the decentralized layer ones that carry on working, and all the systems that are really well designed and designed to be decentralized, we can see these systems actually just keep working. But there's also another component here, and this talks a little bit to the systems we've been building at my project, Orchid. I also believe that decentralization is extremely important for things like anti-surveillance, the ability to speak without censorship. And if we build great cryptography and great VPNs like we've been working on, but they're not decentralized, ultimately someone can just take that down. And if we take a look at some of the systems that we're now seeing, if you've looked at China and the BSN, this is a system which is essentially a permissioned set of blockchains, and it's being built out now. There's permissioned blockchains without cryptocurrency. But they're moving very fast into this concept, first with that, and also with CDBCs. And that's where I'm talking about, we may end up with a worse system than we started from if we allow these systems and we don't fight for the decentralized nature of them. If we allow them to become co-opted, not just corporations, which we're used to talking about, and the Facebook movies and so on, but also institutions, governments, these are really coming for us. We've got MiCA in Europe right now, a new regulation, which is attempting to outlaw stablecoins. You can only have stablecoins made in America to work in Europe. You can't have European stablecoins. And these kind of moves are precursors for then setting up, I believe, central bank digital currencies. And if you want to know what's wrong with central bank digital currencies, just imagine this. You go to the doctor and you get diagnosed with, I don't know, say high blood pressure, or you just too much sugar in your diet. So the doctor says, you just got to stop eating sugar from now on. No sugar, like maybe cut back on the gluten, just a healthy life. And so off you go and you do your thing. But your daughter wants an ice cream one day. So you go in with your central bank digital currency credit card and do the transaction, and you attempt to do the transaction, but it says, sorry, you can't have ice cream today because the government's now said, and it's sent to your health provider and your insurance provider, that these things are now banned for you. You can take this idea to extremes, because once you have programmable money, which we've all been developing, and then you put that in centralized hands, add in censorship, and really we can do anything we want. So that's what I mean by these things can get worse before they get better, or may just get worse. I mean, I read a lot of dystopian sci-fi, so that's maybe why I think these weird thoughts. But I also think that as we build systems, it's really important to think about, and I mentioned this is also not financial advice, but could be construed as such, is that if you focus on building these systems and try to explain to people, hopefully from this talk or maybe from just more reading, why these decentralized architectures are important. Because on the road to the next big ramp in crypto, like adoption, usage, whatever it's going to be, there'll be moments where you say, well, if we just do this centralized thing, we'll be fine. We'll just do this thing, and it'll be all good. It's going to be a little bit harder to do the decentralized play. So like, why not just take a shortcut? Because the money's there, the user's there, let's just make it happen. That move and those design choices, if you're really successful, one of the things I do when I'm investing or building companies, I say, well, what if we're really successful? What's not like the worst case outcome? What's the best case outcome? And then what's the worst outcome from that best case outcome? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen if we make this choice? And I think, I don't want to be the old dog here, but with 10 years in the space, what I've seen is that these decentralized systems and the people who are in this space for the long term and are the most successful and also the most influential are really focusing on this decentralized ideas. I'm probably going to run a little bit short on this one, but we'll do more questions at the end. So I had on this at one point, it was like you could buy a CryptoPunk, which I guess is talking out my bags, but being a punk, being a sort of a radical in the space, like check yourself, like what are your motivations for doing these things? Why are you here? And there's many ways to make money. So hopefully that's not just it, but I think that this, one of the phrases in Silicon Valley where I spent many years is like, are you doing this, is it a missionary or a mercenary? kind of project. Right? Like, why you do this? Hopefully there's some balance between the two, because if you may not make any money, which doesn't make your investors any money, or your team, and maybe they won't do anything again. But the reason behind why you do things, I think, is really important. As I mentioned, we've been building architectures at Orchid. It's a decentralized VPN architecture. It runs on all EVM-compatible chains. We have a high-speed payments architecture based on probabilistic payments. And we started off with initially decentralized VPN architecture, so you can build multiple hops, similar to a Tor-like architecture. It's available on Apple devices and Android. Recently, we've started working on a new architecture which extends this idea to fully programmable services. So you can upload a piece of code in WASM, compatible WASM, and have that executed on different devices and pay for its execution as you go. So we're focusing on this idea of let's focus on surveillance, let's focus on these censorship things, but beyond this, let's focus on trying to decentralize existing systems such as Amazon Lambda and web services. So that's some of the direction we're going in. I'm happy to take questions on that after this. These are my coordinates. My talk seems to get shorter each time, so I've got a few minutes for either for the organizers to get another speaker in, or any questions if you have them. Thank you. Going once. This one.
So you mentioned about central bank digital currencies, and there's a likelihood that we'll be seeing UBI with central bank digital currencies. What do you suggest that people do about it, or what alternatives can we also offer to normies who are like, ooh, that Bitcoin thing, it's crazy. Like, how do you see that panning out?
So your question is kind of like, what do we do about central bank digital currencies, or just like what happens when they happen? Resist, form the underground. I don't know. I think there's. I hope this is the third time I've given this talk. I hope by giving these kind of talks and by trying to educate and more of us do this, we can influence. I do a lot of work in lobbying in the United States and Europe, but trying to educate people and try to educate legislative, regulatory. I think also, like, literally doing what this group of incredible people, this is my favorite conference, I've been here 5 times now, it's just keep doing what we're doing. But as the punks would say, don't sell out.
Hello, thank you very much for the presentation. Again, with the CBDCs, I think that with the employment crisis that we are about to have, the CBDCs and the universal income will shatter the work that we are trying to do by educating people to the new monetary system, and the comfortable lives provided by the governments and the universal income will get our mission really hard. So have you any advice how to best educate people on this matter?
Yeah, I agree. I think one quote was, it's like the ultimate airdrop, right? If you just airdrop the, they're like, oh, that's great. Yeah, same advice. I think we've just got to fight. We've got to try to push. We've got to look for candidates to represent us in politics. We don't always talk about politics a lot, but it's incredibly important given the scale of what we're building. Lobbying efforts. We've got to build. We've got to write. We've got to push these things, and just try and educate your friends. These things are not. I think the initial airdrop will be benign and probably fun, and then people just like start getting more and more into this world. If you look at the Chinese credit score and the systems that are built there, and then even just our own world, we see people get airdrop things and ape in, and then it's actually not that great. But great question, thank you. Okay, thanks very much. Oh, one more, sorry. Sorry, okay, sorry.
Yes, sorry. I didn't realize the question's too late. The question is about politics. I think you mentioned that you do a lot of lobbying, right, and you focus on politics. My question is why? I think that if you're building a decentralized system, you don't need to. You can just completely ignore politics and just build something that works, and politics will be irrelevant. So what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, I get your point. But there's a space from where we are to where we want to be. And in that space, there's various things you can do. You can call things securities. You can ban stablecoins. You can shut down off-ramps. You can outlaw many, many things about what we do. You can say this whole thing is gambling. You can just do things. So most people, I mean, I think maybe we know this, but most people outside of what we do think we're crazy. Especially now, they just think we're nuts, right? And they think most computer science people I know, and even some of the communities that some of our tech at Orchid is addressing, think that this is just a scam and it's going to go away soon. And they've been saying that for a long time, but as we get bigger, there's more people who think it, and so on. So that's an education problem. And if they think it's a scam, then the people who are representing them in politics also think it's a scam. And then the minute that something happens and crashes and people lose some money, they're coming for you, right? They're like, okay, well, there's a problem here, we're going to regulate it. And if you look at like the FDA after thalidomide, that slowed down drug development in the United States drastically, and the Europeans followed it. So that over-regulation can really shut down innovation. And yes, theoretically, maybe we get there, but maybe it takes a really long time. And maybe during that really long time, we have other things that come take us out. Okay, thanks. Last question. I'll be here all day today and tomorrow, so thank you so much.